Well, there are times in the news business that you have to report things you're not very happy about, and I absolutely hate this. Keenan Pili, Caleb, news on him, and it is not good as he left the field during the Florida game, largely unassisted. He was able to walk off under his own power, but Caleb, it appears as if he is done for the year. That is very disheartening.
It is. And beyond what we talk about how this can affect Tennessee, and we're going to get to that. You don't, as when you cover teams, you don't try to root for anybody or teams or things like that. That's not what you're supposed to do. But for a guy like Keenan Pili, I mean, you just paid the great price to play a 7th year of college football, to come back from last year's season-ending injury, and for this to happen, it's a gut punch. It's so sickening. Honestly, it's one of the most sickening stories that I've ever been a part of. And when I mean sickening, I mean sad. Like, no one's at fault for this, but you just hate it from a human perspective.
And listen, it occurred to him last year with a triceps injury in the opener. But for those that don't know, at BYU, he missed almost an entire season with an ACL tear as well. We don't know if it's the same ACL or not. There are times when you can overcompensate and the other ACL is more at risk than the rehabilitated one. But nevertheless, here's a guy that absolutely blew me away from day one in his leadership. I think that his loss last year was undervalued, and then blew me away with his play on the field, his ability to get sideline to sideline with his speed and ferocity. I didn't expect that. I figured a good middle linebacker from tackle to tackle that could call all the right plays would be enough, but he was more than that. And now his season, and I would think his career as a college football player, is done because he applied for that 7th year, got it to come back this year. So you absolutely hate it for him, and probably undermines his value in the NFL, where I think he would have had, if he'd have been healthy the entire time, I think he would have had a good career. But it's also harmful for the Vols. But you just hate this, and we'll get to that. But you hate this more than anything for Keenan Pili.
You do. And I'm sure, and Josh Heupel said he's going to be great, whatever he does in his future. And I do believe that. He seems like the type of guy that, whatever he tries to go for, he'll do well in. I think he came back just to play college football. I think the thing that you can somewhat take solace in is, I don't know, but I don't think he was putting all his eggs in the NFL basket, because he probably knew about what he was dealing with and why teams would be hesitant to take him. And I mean, Dave, how many people have you covered throughout their careers that, like, you were like, man, they could have been an NFL player and they played college ball for years, but by the time they got to the pros, they were so wrecked with injury. It was just, Montario Hardesty comes to mind, right? Montario Hardesty probably could have been an NFL back, but willingly, like, had 3 operations on 2 of his knees before we got to the pros.
Yeah, and there's several more that I could go to. So we share that very unfortunate news with you. There are several former Tennessee players I could go to. So let's talk about that next man up mentality that Tennessee will have to have. That will be Jeremiah Telander, who I know they were very high on headed into the season. Unlike last year, I think Telander's a solid player, but he was in a little bit over his head early against Florida, but kind of came into his own. Caleb, though, that I would say this, the drop to Telander is not as bad as the drop off when Pili got hurt last year.
No, not at all. Elijah Herring was a smart player, very smart, played very hard, just didn't have the lateral quickness. Telander does have the lateral quickness. He can't get beat on certain misdirection plays and passes over the middle. We talked on Saturday about how when he came in, he got beat on so many passes over the middle. I kind of went back and watched, and I think the reason that happened was because Florida started doing all these tight end misdirection plays, and he started focusing on that, and then that's how they started getting him over the middle. So I think there was just far be it for me to say this, but some good offensive game planning early by Florida to try to catch the linebackers off guard a little bit. But I do have faith in Telander, much more faith in Telander to play than I did Elijah Herring. And not to mention, when you talk about the linebackers, football, I hate to quote Butch Jones, but there is such thing as complementary football. And the secondary is so much better this year particularly at cornerback, it makes it a lot easier to have a drop off at middle linebacker this year.
What's realistic for Jeremiah Thielander? Is it just a solid backup, an all SEC player, or is it a devastating hole in the middle of Tennessee's offense? I mean, what if you had to predict between the three of those, what will he be?
Solid backup. I mean, I think he'll be, or a solid starter, I guess now. I think he's a guy who's going to, I mean, I don't see like Jamal Lewis goes down, so Travis Henry comes in and is an all SEC running back. I don't see that. But I do see, okay, he goes down and Thielander comes in and he does his job. I don't think he's going to stand out much, but honestly, I don't think this defense is designed for the middle linebacker to stand out much. It's really designed for the outside linebacker, the Mike linebacker to make all the big plays. And so I think that Thielander knows his role. They were kind of co-starting in fall camp, if you remember Dave Thielander and Pili.
Yes.
I think I know this much. I think the coaches did that because I think they worked overtime to prepare, because I think they knew there was a red flag that Pili could go down again because of his past.
Yeah, I mean, when you're often injured, you're often injured. It's not to say that you're weak or anything like that, but those issues, one tends to lead to another. With Thielander, he benefits greatly from one of the best minds on Tennessee's defense, and that's Arian Carter, who will play alongside him. He is right up at the top, with maybe the top now with Keenan Pili out, of Tennessee defenders who know this offense from top to bottom, Caleb, and he does, and I think he'll be able to help Jeremiah Thielander along the way. It will be interesting to see if Tennessee will flip the line calls, and not the line calls, but the entire defensive calls to Arian Carter. You would like for the middle linebacker to do that, but Carter has a lot more experience. Do you have the Pro Football Focus grades for Thielander over the weekend against Florida?
Yes, I do. And the PFF grade for him against Florida was 58.9. Now, that's going to raise a red flag to a lot of people. But what you have to understand is, again, in complementary football, how other players play affects that. And it can be skewed, because just so you know, Dave, I thought Arian Carter played a great game on Saturday. His PFF grade was a 48.4. And I think the problem with the linebackers was, you're right, they kind of got beat in coverage at times. But the real fault of that was Andre Turrentine, who at safety was at 35.7. And we saw it a lot. He was way out of position. And then Will Brooks was out of position on that final touchdown pass. When your safeties are out of position on plays over the middle constantly, the linebackers are always going to get the brunt of the blame in coverage when it comes to PFF.
I would add this too. I would like to know his PFF grade after the first quarter and a half or so, because I felt like he settled into his role. Whereas I really thought that Thielander's play and not having Pili there could undermine the Vols, I don't think Florida did a good enough job of attacking the middle. I think if they'd have continued to go at Thielander, maybe it gets in his head a little bit and really could have attacked that position. But Billy Napier does Billy Napier stuff, so that's who he is. Moral of the story is I will keep Keenan Pili in my thoughts and prayers. Just an awful situation. And I'm not saying that he had plans for the NFL, but based off how he was playing, I think he would have gotten drafted, don't you?
I think he would have been like a late draft pick or been signed by somebody, because he's a guy you want in your locker room. And we know this with football guys, and it's underrated, but being a good locker room guy outweighs so many other things in the NFL.
But let's not undermine his athletic ability.
He's very talented, but I think that if he was not a good locker room guy, I think his injury issues, people would just run from him. But James Banks
or Jeremy Banks.
Yes, Jeremy Banks, exactly. People ran from Jeremy Banks. They weren't going to run from Keenan Pili because he's such a good locker room guy. I think they were going to give a shot. It reminds me of Kevin Simon, Dave, who actually is a great comparison, was a great linebacker, but just got hurt all the time. Kevin Simon he had way too many injuries to go to the NFL, but Washington still took a chance on him in 2006 because he was one of the best locker room guys Tennessee ever had.
Yep, agreed. We don't break in a lot, but if you're just tuning in for the first time, be sure you've got that like button clicked, and be sure you're subscribed and you ring the bell for all the notifications. For Caleb Calhoun, I'm Dave Hooker. A special break-in brought to you by our friends at Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney, banksandjones.com. Other attorneys say they'll go to trial. They won't. They'll settle and settle for less. banksandjones.com. Play to win, Tennessee's trial attorney, banksandjones.com. This has been a presentation of Off